Hello, I'm Richard Vobes, the Bald Explorer. This is my story, a continuation of my own heritage, really. And I've been doing a few of these. People seem to have liked them, so I'm going to continue. Now, as I record this, we're in the middle of the summer holidays and kids are going back to school. And it made me think about when I went to school and some of the teachers that I had during my school life. Now, I went to a primary school and then to a secondary school, a comprehensive secondary school in the 1970s called Forest Boys. But let's start at Aronside Primary School in Horsham, where I went. And I remember distinctly that my first teacher was a Mr. Shaw, very nice teacher, fairly nondescript really in my memory because I was very small. I must have been about 5 or 6, I guess, when I was in his class. And I can't really think of anything dramatic or unusual or specific about him other than that he was a very kindly sort of chap. And I'm aware that we used to do music and drama and go into the hall, and he would orchestrate us wandering around as animals and all those sort of things. And also that there were plays that came in, people, touring companies, I guess, that came in and would perform things. So that was really him. I'm sure there was somebody else that we had after him, but the next teacher in my education at primary school was a Mrs. Beckett. Now, I remember Mrs. Beckett. She was quite strict, and her class was in the school. It was weird because we were on the ground floor initially, and then there was the upper floor, which of course the older kids used to go to, who were in their sort of 9 to 10, 11 age group. Well, she was on this, I guess, a weird sort of annex to the building that was between the two. So you had this sort of stepping stone, as it were, to the next level. She was an unusual teacher in as much as she had boils. That was the terrible to say this, but that was the thing that has rested on my mind. She had these boils on her face and hair protruded from them, which gave her a slightly frightening experience. Actually, she was a lovely teacher, and once we got to know her, she was really nice. But it was just that initial impression of seeing Mrs. Beckett and thinking that in some way that she was going to be an ogre. But actually, that certainly proved not to be the case at all. So she was okay. The next, we had 2 more teachers at primary school that I remember. And my favourite teacher, and this is mainly because being a 9-year-old at the time, I guess I had a crush. You know, you sort of go, oh my goodness, I've fallen in love with this teacher. Now, her name was Miss Mctanley. She was new to our term. We'd heard that she was coming, this new teacher. Nobody knew what she looked like because we knew that the last teacher was a Mr. Pearson. We'll talk about him in a moment. But there was this new teacher that we were going to go in. Nobody knew who she was. So it was all very odd, and we were quite nervous, I remember, as kids about this. But when she turned up, she was a blonde bombshell. She was this very gorgeous, slim blonde with long hair, long straight hair. And she was a delightful teacher. I'm guessing she must have been in her early to mid-20s when she came to the school. And of course, I was only 9. And I think everybody fell in love with her a bit. But I remember being quite badly smitten, although as a 9-year-old, nobody, of course, takes any of those early emotions seriously. I remember that she used to drive this Morris 1000 Moggy saloon car, you know, the old classic Moggy, and it was a dark blue and very well preserved, not battered or anything like that. I guess quite trendy, and I wasn't one of those kids that got on with many others in the school. My friend Peter Richardson, he'll probably remember her, he used to go home for lunch. So he was my real friend all the way through schooling, and he used to go home for lunch, so I would be pretty much on my own in the playground. I'd sometimes integrate and play with the other kids, but a lot of the time I've always been a bit of a loner. And I remember, this is so bizarre really, that I remember I used to hang around close to the school car park so that I could catch sight of her. And you explain it, you take this any way you like really, but as a 9-year-old, yeah, there was just something rather magical about her. She was a nice teacher. I don't think she showed me any particular favoritism. I don't think she knew that I harbored these unusual at 9 thoughts for somebody like that. And when we came to the end of the term, or that school year, I remember she gave everybody a little present, and she gave me a whistle because she said, "You're bossy," which actually I remember was very disappointing. I didn't think that I was a bossy kid, but apparently I was. Then of course Mr. Pearson was the last teacher in the primary school, and he was very aloof sort of teacher as I remember him. He was very tall, very thin, used to wear dark suits, and was slightly balding as I recall. And now when I think of him, I think of Alistair Sim, nearly forgotten his name, Alistair Sim. I think of Mr. Pearson being a bit like Alistair Sim. Very unremarkable, very aloof really, reasonably strict I suppose. He was, I think, apart from Mr. Shaw, the only male teacher that I had at primary school. And then we left and we were big kids and we had the summer holiday, and then we went to secondary school. Now, secondary school, as I say, was Forest Boys, and at that time Forest Boys had a terrible reputation. It was all boys, obviously, and the kids there, a lot of them were rough and tough, and I didn't really want to go to Forest Boys, but that's, we didn't do the 11 plus. That's what was deemed, didn't know any different, so I went. Now, Forest Boys was a big school. I can't remember how many kids were there, probably 600 or something, some huge number. And they'd just opened a lower version of Forest Boys called Manor House, and it was a new school. It's not there anymore. And we were the first kids in this school, and they shared it with what was known as Malay, which was the girls' school. So half of this school was Forest Boys, half was Malay, the girls' school, which was like effectively Forest Girls, if you like. The Forest bit is named after St. Leonard's Forest. So you had the girls' comprehensive, the boys' comprehensive, and for 1 year only, they were in the same building, but it was split in half. So you couldn't actually get to the girls' side. And I remember the first teacher there, I can't remember her name, maybe Peter, if he's watching this, will remember her name. And I remember the very first lesson we have in there. She was a pretty ineffectual teacher, and I can't remember her name, she was a woman teacher in her sort of middle ages, I guess, but she wanted to set her authority. And the only thing I really remember about her is that she had this sort of smiley face as she was talking to us on I think the first day. And she was telling us about, how the school was going to be and how the lessons were going to be. And suddenly, for no apparent reason, because I don't think that I was talking, she approached me and he said, "And of course, if children misbehave, you will be punished." And suddenly, from out of nowhere, she produced this wooden ruler, and whacked me across the knuckles as a demonstration. Well, this is how I thought it, and it bloody hurt. It bloody hurt. And I almost cried out of the shock, but I didn't. And I looked up and she was just smiling at me, and I must have gone red or something. It was just one of those occasions that you just think, well, that was needless gratuity, really. Many of the teachers were pretty useless, to be fair, at Forest Boys at my term. I remember the geography teacher had no idea about teaching geography. She would just read stuff out of a book, write it on the whiteboards, and we would just copy it down. All about crop rotation in Canada is all I remember about that. She was, again, another middle-aged woman with sort of blondish, light, mousy hair, curly, but boring as anything. Our maths teacher, I remember being very unusual. He was an Asian chap, a bit overweight, and we had these books. I seem to remember them being SMTP or something, and in them would be a question: if you were to add this number to that number, would you get this? And you would work out what the number was, and if so, you would go yes. And he would get you to write that down. So in the book, you would be writing question 1A, yes. And I thought, well, when you revise this back, you've no idea what the question, because you're not actually asked to write the question or anything. You just had written 1A, yes. It was the most peculiar way of doing maths. He was pretty inofficial. He was nice enough, though. Bummer Williams, probably best not to say too much about him, other than that he had a reputation, which is where that name came from. And one time I remember Peter and I we weren't terribly naughty kids. We were bullied a lot. We were bullied, but I think I've covered that in another video, but I won't go on too much about that, other than that one time I was used as a battering ram by the big kids against the lower school. Now not standing, but after they'd used me, it was standing, and I had a terrible headache after that. But one time we were put into detention, Peter and I, no idea. And Bummer Williams also, he was a white guy but overweight, and he had this thing. I think he was to do with PE as well as I can't remember what his main. I think he was maths as well. What is it with maths teachers? And after school, he got us to run around the gymnasium, I remember, and we had to do press-ups and various things and all this after school because we'd been naughty. And then there was the incident in the shower. Afterwards, he got us to go in the shower. I hated having the shower with all the other boys. Absolutely hated that. Wasn't really used to it. Wasn't my thing. And he poked his nose in while we're having a shower. And this is no word of a lie, but I do remember him saying, and this is, whatever it is, he did say, now don't forget, boys, to wash under your foreskins. And he stood there and watched us do it. And that was very uneasy. But anyway, make of that what you will. It's such a long time ago now. Mr. Englebee, one of my favourite teachers. Nobody made a noise in Mr. Englebee's class. Mr. Englebee had absolute control. There was something, he didn't have to do anything. You rarely shouted, but I think he did occasionally. Everybody behaved. Eyes were on the board. We listened intently, and it was, we learnt stuff in his class. We had, I can't remember the history teacher we had. He was great, took us on a trip, maybe some of this for another time. And our French teacher, again, I can't remember his name, which is a shame, but we as kids in the class, we could just get him to talk about any other subject. He would just go on a tangent, tell us about his exploits, often with members of the opposite sex, because as we were growing up and getting to 15 years of age, many of us were interested in different things. Certainly the kids around me. I was actually a lot more focused on making Super 8 films. So it was very different. I was a very different kid than most of the kids at school. Could talk about this a bit more perhaps in another video, but time is against me on this one. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed that. Be interested to know a little bit about your memories of teachers at the school, some of the highlights and maybe some of the lowlights too. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to follow, like and subscribe. Give me a thumbs up if you've enjoyed it, and I will see you on another one. Till next time, bye bye.